Frankie,
Ian, you son of a bitch.
how you doing, handsome boy? You looking good today in purple.
Yeah, it's a good camera angle for me. I got
Good
the light
camera.
right. I'm filming from the blimp. It's gonna be good. It's gonna
You
be
look
good.
great, man. Great lighting. Everything looks really on point. Really good stuff.
Thank you so much.
Really good stuff. Your taste in art in the back, really good. Feel like you're copying me because I got this amazing art behind me.
Always.
Always copying me. So, Frankie, today we are going to talk about something that I am enthused about because I was there for the whole journey talking it through with you. We are going to talk about if Frank could go back in time, like Uncle Rico, to 2009 when you started Cava Companies, which I think was Cava Capital at the time. What would you change and what would you keep the same? So today, Cava Companies employs 27 employees. You have a handful of executives. You have how many salespeople?
Actual sales 3, sales support 6. So 9 people in the sales department.
Okay, and handful of project managers, operations, production, office managers.
Property management, property service managers.
You got a fractional CFO, helps you with finance. It's a grown-up organization.
Yes.
You know, with an organization chart, you're leveraged. 10 million in revenue you're going to do this year, about?
Revenue, our gross profit number should be almost that high. So like our actual revenue will be even higher, but yeah, with real estate, it's hard to say, but it's definitely an 8-figure business annually, with sales. If you factor in like property values, probably like 20-25 million.
Okay. So, in general, you've got a thriving business that is profitable, that employs folks in the state of Virginia, and you are looking to expand it. And that's roughly in 10 years, you built that from your first, really the business started with you owning one condo in Charlottesville, right? After you left NVR. So you were at NVR for 13 years.
Yep.
Decided you'd had enough of NVR. It was time to start over. You had a little bit of capital, you know, more than most would start with, I would say. But you didn't have a business. You certainly didn't have a brand. You didn't have anything other than you were really a freelancer. Freelancer who was looking to invest in some real estate 10 years ago. So if we go back and look at that moment when you left a big company, which was the only company you ever knew after graduating Florida, you worked for one big Fortune 500 company for 13 years, did a lot, had a lot of success, but really never had any startup experience whatsoever. And I think you'd be the first to say, if you could start over again, there's no way it would have taken you 5 or 6 years to get pace the way it did the first time through.
Yeah, I've started several businesses since I started this one. Like when I started my core business, I had to learn it from scratch, but now I have property management. Now I have all these other offshoot businesses, and I use those lessons, and those things have caught up very quickly and become profitable and become successful very fast because I used a lot of the lessons that I had learned through the primary entity that I started.
Yeah. So talk about you leave the nest. You've had success. You were a vice president at NVR. You've, you know, as a division manager, you've built hundreds and hundreds of homes. You've done just about every job, sales, project management. Now you're on your own. Talk about your mindset, your mentality, your confidence level once you got out into the world.
So I'm actually going to go back a smidge from that point for this reason. There might be people who are listening to this who are thinking about quitting. Like I really have a passion project. I mean, shit, you and I talked about this when it started to become an inkling of an idea for you of like, we had good jobs. They paid a lot of money. We were successful. People relied on us. We were important. And walking away from that is not easy. Now, we walked away with it. You wanted to coach Little League. I wanted to build a business. We had different goals. But where I was and when I did it and where you were somewhat similar but somewhat different, I think if you're going to quit and you're going to start something, having some level of knowledge, knowing where you want to go. Can you seed it ahead of time before you get rolling? So these are things that are, had I done it all over again, I probably would have done a little bit more success work before I stopped. You and I have both seen people mail it in who took an extra year around the merry-go-round at NVR, collected the paycheck, and built something. I didn't. I just set off. The things that were helpful is I had done many jobs. I had built houses, I had estimated houses, I had sold houses, I had managed the construction process, I had managed the sales process, and I was a vice president. Why is all that relevant? If you look at studies, the people who are most successful at startups, there's the one-offs, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, those people are way smarter than me. And they did something revolutionary. But people who kind of take a business that's already there and grow it, they're usually older. They have experience and they have money. So having those things can help you. I didn't have tons of money, but I wasn't broke. And I did have a decade plus of experience in the area that I chose. So those were kind of the launching points I think are relevant to talk about. Where do you want to go from there?
I do have a question. So early at MVR, your frustration level just got to a place where you weren't 100% certain what was next. You knew you weren't staying. And that had been building up since you moved down to Charlottesville and were having to drive up to Fairfax. That wasn't an overnight decision, but it had been growing on you for a couple of years that you've kind of felt trapped in a big company. But when you got into it, when you say, I had all this skill set in real estate, which, residential real estate is what you've built your business on. Were you 100% certain that was the business you were going to grow? Or did it ever cross your mind that you would invest in real estate and build a different business, which is similar to what I'm doing? Anyone who would ask me, what are you doing? I wouldn't say I have a real estate business. I own a lot of real estate. I'm involved tangentially in a lot of real estate. I've raised money for real estate, but I don't know that I'd tell anyone my occupation is real estate. It's kind of how I invest. My business is a little bit different.
So you and I in prep, we talked about this a great deal. We're going to talk through the arc of this conversation about what are things that we would do different. I'm 45 now. When I started this, I was 33, 34. So the way I look at the world now and how I would attack the world is different than I would have as a 34-year-old. As a 33, 34-year-old, I think you got to just attack the world. Now I think maybe you could be somewhat strategic in how you've done it the way you have. You've done it in a way that the real estate serves you. I started really on the ground level with some assets that I might not have wanted to actually own. And I kind of built this thing. My goal was to build a business. I didn't know if I wanted to become MVR or what, but I wanted to build a business, and I wanted to build a business that had assets.
And always residential real estate? Were you locked in on, I've left here, I want to build I don't know if I want to be a builder, but you knew you wanted to build a business around residential real estate, 100%? You never thought a commercial real estate, you never thought about being a speaker or running, doing something different, totally different?
So there's two things here. And I don't know if you and I have ever even actually talked about this. There's a guy that I work with in Charlottesville who's an independent builder. He sold us lots. You've met him. He's a great dude, but he was real smart. He owned his own business, and his business was way smaller than NVR, like way smaller than the division that I ran. But I remember always thinking that every single day when he showed up at work, he was building his net worth, where you and I would have to build our net worth after we put in a full day, after we've worked a Saturday or a Sunday. We had to do it really early or really late. We weren't dedicating the best hours in our day to building something that was for us. So that was one of my main motivators, is I want to put the main part of my focus on in growing me, if you will. The only thing I really knew was home building, and I knew I had an advantage in home building. But I started this, I think this is relevant. I flipped my first house in 2007. I skipped work on my birthday in 2007. I quit in 2009, and I went to Fairfax County, and I bought a foreclosure. And I bought it in cash, and I flipped it, and I made like 40 grand. insignificant amount of money in today's terms, but not insignificant at the time. And I was like, holy shit, I might have something. I knew in 2009 when I quit and I was starting this that I absolutely did not want to be a builder. There was too much risk, and I had watched NVR with $2 billion in the bank lose 60% of its divisions and completely contract because they basically did one thing. They only built houses. Now, you sold the mortgages, so they really did two things, but that was it. And I didn't have $2 billion in cash. I had a shitload less than that. So what I looked at is, how do I go make money, not lose, and how do I build something that has a four-legged stool? And what I built was a business that had ownership and flips because we could make money pretty quickly. Eventually, we bought a hold piece. Then I got into property management, and then I got into the other piece, which was education and kind of consulting, because I looked at it from that standpoint of that could strategically set me up no matter the market.
So you have a business, you come up with a name, pretty simple name. You
thought about it for months. This is what I landed on.
Form an LLC. You still think about it all the time. You've changed your name like 8 times. It's ridiculous. But you've got an LLC formed and you're out there. You've told people I'm a businessman. I've started a business, which that's half the battle. When you start telling people that I've started a business, now you've put yourself out there. It's like telling people you're on a diet. If the next time they see you, you're not lighter, you're going to be embarrassed because you told people about it. So you've got this business. Talk about, if you were going back and talking to that guy who started, talk to me about your mindset, your self-confidence. What kind of encouragement would you be giving that guy 10 years ago that he would need?
So there's big and small stuff, right? Small stuff. Go get an office space. Don't work out of your house. Like, leave the house. Have a divorce of home life and business life. So Ian and I have both.
I love that. I love that. Before you dive, why? Like, why?
So you and I have both been important people with corner offices inside of organizations. When you're at home and there's laundry to fold and there's a TV and there's other just household shit going on, you are no longer focused on being a business person. You're getting distracted by the dishwasher and it's below you. It pulls you in. It doesn't give you the ability to focus. In addition to that, like, I do dress relatively nice. Now, I don't wear slacks like I did, but I usually wear a business shirt. I wear nice shoes, and it's a mindset for me. Like, I have plenty of Under Armour shit or Lululemon stuff. I don't wear it to work because I want my mindset to be, I'm going to work. And I struggle with that at first. When I had an office at home and I was wearing the same clothes at 6 o'clock at night that I woke up in, I wasn't as productive. It wasn't as good for my psyche. I wasn't on my edge. I felt like I was at home, so I didn't have that ability to, I didn't have the edge. And that is such a small thing, but it really sets you up.
I got to tell you, this is advice you gave me out of the gate because I was complaining about being at home, right? For as long as Jenny and I have been married, I worked 12-hour days. So it was, we had this equilibrium that we had reached where Ian gets up super early, works out. I see her for a second before I leave and I'm gone and she's with the kids doing things all day. I was maybe home for a week before I was looking for an office space, even before I even had any idea what kind of a business I wanted to build. Because while I was at home, I felt like I wasn't doing anything. I felt unproductive. I felt like I wasn't getting started until I took out some office space and started paying monthly. It motivated me. It made me think, you're starting a business. It was a mindset shift for me. That was great advice you gave me because I probably didn't need it as much because I had little kids at home too. You didn't have kids when you were starting, but you got kids in the house. There's just no way you can focus, during the day.
And I think this is relevant and we should actually talk about it. While we're filming this, we're in the middle of coronavirus, right? We're filming this 5 months into coronavirus. Almost everybody in America is now working from home. There's all these articles about how all these companies have talked about, that's it, we're all going remote. Bullshit. Now there's a bunch of articles 5 months later where they're like, people were afraid they were going to get fired and they were holding everything together with baling, like chewing gum and baling wire. There's a reason there's office space. There's a reason why Apple and Microsoft have spent billions of dollars on office space. People are more productive there. So it made me, one of the things we're going to talk about is confidence. When I'm in like my boxer shorts and a tank top and I'm working from home, I didn't have the same level of self-confidence that I did wearing a nice pair of shoes and a nice dress shirt and going somewhere. When you walk to the bathroom, you bump into someone, you have higher level conversation. Like those are little things that set yourself up. Now, a lot of people I know have built businesses working at Starbucks. That isn't for me either. Like I wanted a real space. Like some days you go out and you do those things, you work from a cool spot, but having a place to call your home. We're going to talk about this at some point, but having leverage over yourself. And this is what I mean by that. It's really small. You and I didn't really need to make money when we first quit our jobs. A lot of people do. But knowing that you have to pay rent, it's one thing you got to do. It's a little bit of responsibility. It reminds you that you're in the game. You know, it's these little things you've got to do. That to me was big.
I mean, the way to build more wealth is when you make wealth, you go spend it. You go invest it. You go put it away. You don't leave it sitting in a big pile in an office or in a bank account. You start to spend it. And then 100%, when I started paying rent, I started thinking more and getting more serious about, all right, how does this lead to revenue at some point? What do I need to do to cover some of this? It got me thinking differently quickly. And I'm with you on I tried the coffee shops and, you know, I didn't even really like the WeWork where you just have a space to go sit in. I need somewhere to put my stuff. I need my monitors. I have whiteboards here. I can bring things, leave them. I have all my books. I have a lot of different things. I've got my podcast mic. I need a place that I'm leaving things and I'm not vagabond just picking up and putting everything in a bag and bringing it back and forth every time. That didn't work for me. I tried the WeWork thing for about 3 months and it wasn't for me for what I was trying to build.
And if you're listening to this and you're accustomed to working remotely, it doesn't matter what we did. What are you going to do? What fits you and your personality and what gets a fire burning under your ass? That's what's the important thing. And that for me, getting out of the house, having a little bit of confidence, knowing I had an office and a couple of small successes, like when I bought my first house and I flipped it, and I actually cashed a check. Those little things kind of set me down the road of feeling like I did not just absolutely napalm something good and the best days of my life were behind me. But if I'm being honest, I did feel that way for a very long time.
Did you, with self-confidence, did you undercut yourself in your own mind? Did you kind of discount your own experience, from when you were around other people or you saw someone who was ahead of you maybe as a startup founder, but from an experience standpoint was way beneath you? It was almost like you kind of threw away 13 years of experience for a big business because it was somehow different.
Yeah. Yes. And biggest regrets that. So a couple of things, right? Like I was I had all the skill, but you and I are relatively humble kids. We talked about this before. I mean, if you hang out with us, you're in Vegas, you're not gonna think we're humble at all, but like deep down, we're fundamentally like prudent people. So I went out and I hired a bunch of I went to a bunch of classes and I met with people and I asked a question. They wanted you to close your eyes and raise your hand if you've done over a certain number of deals. Like, have you done over 1 deal? Have you done over 5 deals? Have you done over 10 deals? And he asked if you've done over 100 deals. And I hesitated to put my hand up. At that point in time, because of my MBR experience, I'd done a couple of 1,000 deals. But I didn't even know if I could answer that question right. So I was like, well, did I do it? Did somebody else do it? So you want to divorce yourself from this other business, but you also need to take credit for the things you did do. And corporate America is really good at giving you no fucking credit for the things that you've done, even though you've done them. So when you go into something new, you do need to think about, what are my strengths? What are my limitations? What have I done? That's an example. Another example, like I told you I did this. I paid to go to classes. I went to seminars. I did all kinds of stuff. I paid 50 grand, not an insignificant amount of money for a mentor. And I got on the phone with him, and it was a salesy type of a thing, but I was so fucking distracted and lost. I paid him 50 grand. This guy's a dipshit. He has fucking filed bankruptcy since. 50 grand. So like a waste. I told you about it and you're like, get out, man. Like, let's look at the contract. But I didn't. What I did is I embraced that period in life and I just made the mistakes. But with that one introduction, he introduced me to Medley, who you know, and who was a great introduction because that's been a group of people who I've met through a mastermind network who had been very helpful. So there's not an easy path with this, but you're going to make mistakes. But what I would say is make mistakes bigger than you think you should. And if you do make a mistake, don't repeat it.
One, you know, as I remember watching you grow the business, it was you for a long time doing everything. In a long time. I mean, how long was it where it was just Frank Cava doing it all, finding the deals, getting involved? You were walking every site with a contractor. You were selling them. You were the one flipping it. How long did that go on? And if you looked back at that period, was it about right? Was it too short, too long?
So it was about 4 years from when I quit my job to when I actually started to hire staff. And again, I keep referencing when this happened. I started this business in 2009. 2009, the economy was a mess. The home building sector was absolutely in ruins. I had hired tons of, when Ian and I graduated from college, we were both kids who could speak and could sell. So they sent us to college campuses to recruit. I'd recruited hundreds, if not thousands of kids to come work for NVR. Then I fired like 100 of them within like 90 days. So I was rattled. It was the first time I'd ever gone through this. So when I started, I was really worried about bringing someone in and not being able to pay them, having to fire them. So for way too long, I put all the burden on myself. And not only did I put the burden on myself, it thwarted growth because I had a skill set. I just thought that I must do it myself. I must grow it slowly. And in retrospect, I should have probably had a team of 4 within about 90 days. Once I did my first deal and I knew there was proof of concept, I probably should have hired some real people who could have helped because I would have gotten further way faster.
So, okay. So let's dive into that. You think within 3 months of your first deal, you should have hired 4 people. Who are those 4 people?
So ultimately, the first person I hired was a part-time bookkeeper. I probably should have had a full-time person pretty early. I should have had someone who was project managing. I should have had someone who was dealing with marketing and lead generation. And I probably, if that person wasn't good enough to be in sales, I probably needed someone in sales. So I did what a lot of people do, and I think this is a problem. I tried to find people who are willing to work for free. If you're willing to work for free, you aren't very good. Like you and I have never worked for free. And I mean, I'm a paid consultant for a mastermind group. I see hundreds of business owners a year that try and do this. They never get anywhere. Because if you're hiring dog shit talent who can't find another job, who's willing to work for you for free, you're never going to get anywhere that you want to go. You're going to constantly have problems. But we talked about having leverage over yourself with rent. What I did in about 2013, 4 years in, I had an office space that was expensive at the time, and I had 3 employees besides me. That got me out of the house to the office. It got me motivated. It got me to a point where I had people who I knew relied on me. At some point, we'll talk about the difference of hiring for a startup versus hiring for a mature business. I couldn't hire people. I couldn't figure out how to attract the people who I can attract now then. So I had people who were decent. They weren't great, but they did help me get from that startup phase to something that was sustainable. And that kind of helped me grow to where we are now.
You hired a bookkeeper, right? And you're in a business where your balance sheet, where your expenses, your income, there are a lot of items coming in and out, and where capital is critical. So you look at that bookkeeper that you hired who's, doing what you paid to do, right? You're paying as little as you possibly can for someone to try to mind your books. Should it have been a higher level financial mind that was helping you figure out how to move capital, how to acquire capital? Should you have brought in someone who fractional CFO type of mind, someone who had really helped steer strategy for a company before?
So the answer to that question is absolutely and a resounding yes. One of the things that happens when you leave, you and I have talked about this in your business, right? You had non-competes and things. I had the same. I should have called the attorney that you and I both know and talk about very highly, very often. I should have called him early. I should have taken him to coffee, said, this is what I want to do. I need a strategy session. The meeting would have cost me a couple hundred to a couple $1,000. And then the $50,000 I paid for that dipshit mentor, I should have invested it into the most important things in the business, which would have been someone who can help me find capital. If you're going to be in a real estate business, having capital is the kindling on the fire. Because if you can find the deals and you don't have the money, you can't grow it. So should I have? Hell yes. I should have had somebody, I should have taken that 50 grand and invested in 2 or 3 employees who could help me. I should have reminded myself that I'm not a project manager, I'm a CEO. And I should have worked directly with someone who could help me with banking relationships, capital relationships, debt, equity, all of that. Things that I had to learn over time that I didn't do right away, that had I done it sooner, we could have been a lot further along.
So why is understanding capital, why is it so critical to a new business owner? And because I talk to small business owners on a regular basis, and what I find is most of them are running their business chasing the payments they have to make back to banks or capital, or they're just kind of one thing after another. It's funny, we both loved Shoe Dog, the story of Nike. The first 10 chapters of that book are about him trying to make his payments and thinking about giving up because he's always trying to finance the next seed round.
So your question is, why is finance so important? So again, we're just coming out of the coronavirus. We're figuring this stuff out. I went in and looked at my balance sheet, and I own a lot of real estate. I don't own, I don't own Sam Zell qualities of real estate, but I own 300 to 400 houses, not an insignificant number of houses. And we've got mortgages and I've got different businesses. But if you were to look at it, what you're going to see is my most expensive expense every single month is interest. It's not even close. Like if you take interest across all the properties that we own, it's into the millions per year in interest payments. So the difference in paying 5, 6, 7% interest versus 3.5% or 4.5%, it's millions over the course of the year. It's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that you make by doing nothing other than being slightly more sophisticated with your banking. You and I were talking about this in prep. I did not go to an Ivy League school. I do not have an MBA. I do not have anyone in my family who went to Wharton or anything like it. I learned finance from my dad. My dad's an in-cash kind of guy. He is not someone who's ever really scaled a business. He's been in business since, if you really boil it down, he's been in business since he was in the 3rd grade. He's never had more than 2 employees, and those 2 employees were my brother and me. That's it. And I watched him
underpaid
scale.
Always.
And the thing with cash, I didn't know how to grow. My dad's business was always paid for in cash. He never had debt. He never had leverage. He never understood it. And we're dads. You and I have had conversations about how are we going to teach our kids fundamental skills like how do you save? How do you build wealth? How do you have retirement? How do you not have to be a slave to a job? All these little things that we talk about, we've had to learn on our own. So I didn't understand how critical capital is. A decade into it, it's incredibly critical, and I know how important it is. Like, I'm actually having conversations now with someone who is in my market. I'm going to have to give away a few trade secrets, but his cost of capital is almost 100 to 200 basis points, which is 1 to 2% in cost. It's going to cost me a couple $100,000 to hire this guy and retain him and get this, but it could save me up to that much annually, if not more so. So it's critical. In prep, you and I kind of talked about like the cupcake maker, right? There's the cupcake maker that has grandma's recipes or who has perfected the cupcake. We love to eat there, but they go out of business all the time. It's the people who understand the balance sheet, who understand the business. It's someone who's got smart business minds or money behind them that end up becoming the cupcake shop that's on every corner because of the fact that it's just better run. So these are little things that I didn't know and I stumbled through, but having a strong financial background or having a strong financial footprint in your business is one of the things that you just cannot fake.
So as you're hiring folks, obviously finance is a big one, but your first hires, you lowered your bar because you were trying to spend as little as possible. You were trying to be conservative. As you're doing that, as part of that, you're trying to protect your nest egg, or as part of, where you don't want to be dipping too much into it, or as part of it, you don't have enough confidence in yourself yet that you can cover it in revenue with those hires? And would you go back and just hire one star and spend a lot more money, find one really good person that could do a number of things and work with? So I guess two-part question: what's behind you being, penny foolish on that? And would you do that a little different?
I was going to say D, all of the above. But now that it's a two-part question, let's talk about where I was. I had just fired tons of people leaving NVR. I was a believer that NVR was the strength, not me. I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able to, eventually I was going to go broke. And shit, if I go broke, so is anybody who works for me. They're not going to be able to pay their mortgage. So I was really worried about those things. And because of that, I made bad decisions, and I ended up hiring people that, like you said, were way below where I should have hired. What should I have done differently? I alluded to it earlier. If you can keep a job and proof concept with your current, what you're going to do with your side hustle or what your new job is going to be or your new career, that's the best. If you can find someone where you can figure out a way how to pay those people and attract the right person, that's incredible. I was trying to figure out proof of concept, all these other things. So who to hire, how do you do it? It's like it's managing Jello. So it was really a very hard thing to come up with. So the answer, Ian, is if you said, Frankie, if you had to redo this again, what would you do? Number one, I would pick a proof of concept and a lane, and I would focus in it. Second, I would find a couple of key hires that could help me become really good at that very fast. That's the most important thing. And a lot of us are trying to do 10 things at once. Do one or two critical things, maybe 4, but just a few critical things. Do them well, do them repetitively, and grow it. You've done it with your writing career. I mean, shit, we were talking the other day about things you've posted and how a year ago you got 100 views, now you're getting 10,000 because you just do it every day. It's the little fundamentals.
I like it. So what about your first deals? What when you got out there and you started investing capital, what type of deals were you doing? And if you were giving advice to 2009 Frank, what advice would you be telling him about the type of deals that he was doing?
So there's 2 ways to go with this. The deals I was doing in some instances were beneath me. They were little deals. They weren't great. It was kind of stuff that I could find. I will tell you this. You are not really in business until you can generate leads and you can convert those leads, no matter what business you're in. I didn't know that at the time. I thought I'll just find the house. I'll do this. You are a hobbyist until you can figure out how to make the phone ring. That's it.
Consistent lead inbound flow.
That's it. And I mean, this year alone, we've gone from 250 leads a month to like 500-600. We really crushed it. It took me a decade to get the phone to ring 200 times in a month. Like, it's not easy. But once you can consistently generate leads and you can consistently convert those leads and turn them into revenue, that's when you have a repeatable model. That's when you have a real business.
So how would you have done that faster? Because that took you a while to figure that out.
So,
again, probably 3-4 years until you had any kind of lead flow.
Until I joined the mastermind group, I didn't know how to do it. So what I should have done, Ian, is I should have said, here are the pieces of my business that I can outsource. I can outsource books. I can outsource construction. I can outsource a few other pieces. Here are the pieces I cannot. I cannot outsource lead generation. I cannot outsource conversion. I cannot outsource sales. And eventually in 2013, 4 years in, that's what I started to do. I found the people who could help with those items. I had a bookkeeper, I had a project manager, and then I dove headlong into sales and lead generation. If you watch the business from 09 to 13, we were about flat. 13, 14, 15, we started to grow. We started doing 10 to 15 deals a year for those first 4, maybe in the 20s. We jumped into the 50s. Then we were in the 60s. Then we were in the 80s. 2015, when I moved to Richmond, we went to 100, 150 deals a year. That's when I had staff and people. Now we do 300, 400 deals a year because I've really honed in those systems. And now I've upgraded. I've gotten people with MBAs who replace people who barely had college degrees running that department. They're hardworking, they're ethical, they're smart. There's so many things that I couldn't attract before that I attract now. And I say, here's the system that I've painstakingly worked on for a decade. Go break it, make it better. Go get us more. And once that started to happen, you get smart people working on things that you've built, foundations you built, they can take off.
So you're at a Fortune 500 company. You've been there for 13 years. And when you're in that bubble, you have mentors everywhere. You've probably at MVR, how many direct bosses did you have? 7 or 8 over the years?
Oh yeah. And
maybe
then
more.
Yeah, and then if you look at Newman was my boss, but Kenny was his boss, and I had a great relationship with both of them, and Rainer was over there. Like you and I were both guys that came on board, proved ourselves, and we always had people who wanted to help us because they saw themselves in us. And even 2-3 managers removed knew my name and wanted to help. So it was a new
all the way up to, you didn't have a relationship with the CEO, but you saw him once a quarter and he gave you advice and he was incredibly smart and you learned from being in a room with him.
And his staff was smart, so they would ask questions to make you think. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
the questions he would ask you, the way, the advice that he might give. So, in a Fortune 500 company, you are just loaded with mentors all around you. There's just never a shortage of people to ask a question to if you're confused. If you're working for a Fortune 500 company and you're a manager, you're a new manager, and you're saying, I don't know what to do next, you're just not trying. You're just not picking the phone up and asking, because my experience is those folks, the people with the most experience, are just so incredibly excited to help people. And they love it when people ask them. So you had that. Now you're on your own and you're pretty much shut off from all those folks because you just left them. And once you leave a company, no matter how much people liked you, you're kind of on the outs. Big companies are very much, you're either with us or against us. Over a few years, people kind of get over that. But my personal experience with both Fortune 500 companies that I left, once I left, it was crickets. You get a few people saying we'll miss you, but then it's crickets. And it's
That's right.
Whatever.
There's a really fun party that you're going to have for a few weeks. And then, people are going to text you, you're going to go to a dinner or a coffee. And then a month after you've left, it's over.
They've moved on. So now you might be looking at a real estate deal and you had 10 people you could have asked about a real estate deal 1 month before, and you can't call any of them because they're not about to help you. They probably see you as a competitor. They're not about to try to help. So,
and these are smart people who know what it has taken for other people to quit and become successful. And most people don't. Most people don't become successful, and they're not going to, as much as they loved one of us, we had the proof concept with strangers before they were going to give us one fucking nickel or they were going to help us, because of the fact that That's just how life works. Like you've got, like when Ian was thinking about quitting his job, we were talking about it a little bit, and he told me what he wanted to do. And one of the things I said is, you think you have your voice, but you don't. And do you remember me saying that?
Yeah.
And how have you built a voice in the last 3 years?
Well, it's true. Your voice is someone else's voice when you work for a Fortune 500 company. It's not your voice. You're a steward of someone else's ideas. Even though you think your ideas matter and they're everyone's so replaceable. I've seen so many managers come and go from companies, and it's window dressing for the most part in a big company that you're doing. So once you go out on your own, you're a steward of your own ideas. Anything that's going to be built is going to come directly from you. They're all your ideas. So it takes a while to get your voice, and you got to put it out there for a while, to get it started. But where I'm going on the mentor side of this, though, with mentors, when you're starting, you need them. When you're a startup, you need mentors in so many different areas.
More than you do with a corporate company, because they're there, and more than you probably give it credit.
What'd you do right and what'd you do wrong with the mentors that you chose when you started, and including timing?
What I did wrong, I did a lot wrong. And it took 3 or 4 years to find the right group. And what I kind of did was, instead of being incredibly strategic, I kind of took what fell in my lap. I wasn't smart. I wasn't strategic. I wasn't thinking through it. I didn't manifest, okay, if I do this now, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, it's going to look like this. I had an idea and I had a plan, but it wasn't a really great plan, and I didn't seek the people who could have helped. What I probably should have done in retrospect is I probably should have gone and talked to the attorney that I reference a lot, who's an M&A attorney in this space, and said, this is what I want to do. Who are the 3 to 5 best voices? And I should have gone to the top of the food chain and started there and worked my way down. And what I did instead is I started at the bottom and tried to work my way up. And it caused a lot of missteps. I think this is relevant, Ian. When I started in 2009, podcasts were in their infancy. Getting good advice was really hard. There are so many freaking podcasts nowadays. I mean, hell, 1-year-olds just fart and it's a podcast. There's topics on everything. So finding information is a little bit easier now than it was then. And the other thing is there's a lot of people who fucking lie. That's all there is to it. You see a picture of someone getting on a jet, or you see these, like, all this amazing stuff. Like, there's this guy on my Facebook feed who's always posting pictures of his Porsche. Like, he's full of shit. So you've got to be very, very selective in who you listen to. And it's hard to do that. If I could do it all over again, before I quit my job, I would know who my network was, who my network isn't, clearly define it, have a little bit of a better path, and understand what it is that I want to do. And maybe while you have friendly people in front of you, ask them questions that don't give away the fact you're thinking about leaving. If you work for a big company and there's a subcontractor who used to work there, take them to lunch and ask them questions of, you used to work here, you built a successful business. What did you do? What did you screw up? Like, have some of those types of like, I can think of like the drywall sub from Northern Virginia, who you and I love. I should have gone to lunch with him 5 minutes after I quit, but I didn't. Like, little things like that, and talk about, like, and if you do work at a Fortune 500, you work at a company and someone has quit, they know exactly what you're living through. Talk to them. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you could really use as benefit. And I didn't do that. I don't know if it was stupidity, if it was arrogance, if it was being scared. I fucked that up. Like, no way around it.
What'd you do right when it came to mentors, and how long did it take you to figure out how to do it right?
So, kind of like we were talking about raising capital, I didn't want to raise capital from friends. And the reason I didn't want to raise capital from friends is because if I lost their money, I thought I could possibly lose them as friends. And I felt very vulnerable and very, very much in a point in my life where my friendships were so important because my business was shit and everything. Like, all that other stuff was rattled. So my buddy Nickel, 4 or 5 other people I would just talk to about fundamental things. And what I eventually did is I found a network of people who were really good at direct-to-seller marketing and advertising, my biggest weakness, and I joined that group. And it was like 15 grand a year. We had to travel a bunch. You couldn't use Zoom like this then, so you had to get on a plane. And it was not an inexpensive thing. And it was kind of taking a risk. And I'd already been burned by so many dipshits that were telling me they were mentors and experts that I was incredibly skeptical. And what I ended up doing was I went there and I was very cautious, probably like I should have been to start. And I eventually found a flock of people who were helpful. You've met many of these people, Mike J, Chris Richter, my buddies, who eventually I found the people who were full of crap, and I found the people who weren't, and I started to hone in on that. And the other thing, what started to happen at the same time, I realized what my special strengths were. I realized what my weaknesses were. And I started to realize in the market that I'm in, these are the benefits of this market. You've got to be very, very truthful on that. Like people will say, hey, does this strategy work? I'm like, yeah, it works great in Colorado Springs. It doesn't work worth a shit in Richmond. Like understand where you are in the world. Like I used to live in Charlottesville and I moved here to Richmond, which is an hour away, but it's 10 times the population. There's way more distressed inventory, which is what I focus on. The people are easier to hire. The wages are less. It's more diverse. There's so many great things here that weren't there, but I was so blinded, I didn't even see that for a while.
So that's one of the pieces of your journey that I remember directly. I remember asking you that question a lot because, you know, you were, so what, hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half from Charlottesville to Richmond. So you did that. You were seemingly doing that commute daily for a while. And, you know, you had 3 hours in a car, so you were always bored and leaving me voicemails or calling. And the times where I wasn't working, I would pick up. And it always just felt like you were coming and going from Richmond. And I remember this was going on for months and months and months. And I would just say, why don't you live in Richmond? Why do you still, like, if there's no deals in Charlottesville, if that's not a target rich area and you love Richmond's for its opportunities, what are you still doing in Charlottesville? So talk through a little bit on why that took you so long to make the decision to move.
So what I think is really important to talk about is Ian and I are pretty successful guys. I was a pretty successful guy before I quit my life and started a new business. And I made every freaking mistake you can possibly make. And not only that, like something as simple as I need to move. I didn't see it. Like I thought I bought my house that I lived in Charlottesville and I'm like, this is going to become a rental. But the market had gone upside down. I didn't have as much equity in it as I thought. I was focusing every day on building a business and doing all these other things. I didn't pull my head up enough to stop, take a real good look at what was happening around me and make good critical decisions. And I can't remember where I read this or exactly how it was stated, but I read it a couple of days ago that if you're running a business and you don't have the time to stop and think, you're not going to be a very good business and you're not going to be a very good business owner. And that just shows you if you're doing all this little stuff yourself, you get so mired in the survival and getting the deal done, you miss big critical things that are right in front of you that strangers or like 8-year-olds can see. And when I finally pulled myself away and said, hey, I bought this house, I still have equity. It's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I'm going to pivot. I'm going to sell this house. And from the moment I made that decision to when I lived in Richmond, it was under 90 days. And my business had gone from doing right around like 35 to 50 deals a year. We jumped, like we almost doubled in less than 6 months because I was in a better place. I was focused on where I needed to be. And that's the stuff that if you kind of just charge headlong into this and you don't have a plan, you can miss. And I missed it for a while.
I think it's helpful too. You know, you've got an attorney, you've got a mastermind, you've got a group of other owners that give you advice. Even for me, I remember all those conversations we would talk about it, not even just from business. You didn't like being in Charlottesville. Every time I asked you about it, you'd say, I hate it. Every restaurant, it's such a small town. You were single at the time. Every restaurant you went into, you bumped into 2 girls that you had dated before. There was nothing new, nothing there was no front, there was nothing about it that made you happy. And so I would hear all this, and then I would hear you say, and there's no business opportunities. And for me, looking from the outside, it was like, why didn't you move 6 months ago? It was so obvious. And if it's not Richmond, go back to Florida, go somewhere where there's more opportunity, bigger city, you needed all of it. I saw it very easily because I wasn't mired in the mix of it. I think having people around you that will just shoot you straight, or you can bounce it off of, that can see it and know you well enough is pretty important.
So the determination, the grit, and the unwillingness to fail has gotten me here. No question. But there's a stubbornness that comes with that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have good counsel, and if you don't have people that you can rely on, and if you just are so freaking stubborn, you can't listen to anybody, no matter if you're one person or 100 people, you're going to become a dinosaur. You're going to go extinct. You're not going to be able to make it. So there's both sides of that equation. And what you start to realize, like if you are like a startup like I was, where everything was riding on it, everything I had built, all of my money, I put everything behind it. I was unrelenting, unfailing. But had I been a little bit smarter and had a little bit better counsel, and had I been a little bit more strategic, I probably would have had I probably would have done less brain damage to myself. And I think I would have gotten there a hell of a lot faster and easier. And you often hear this, and I can tell you from a decade in, start at the end and work backwards. Like owning assets is what I ultimately wanted. I probably couldn't have said that to you as clearly 10 years ago. So let's talk about getting here. There's brain damage that goes along with it. You can't get it all right. Look at great companies. Look at Amazon. Look at Tesla. Look at great startups. They've dealt with the same shit. They have more money, and they've had seed capital, and they've gone public. So it's a little bit different, but it's the same process. It's constantly evolving, constantly getting better, constantly doing those things. The other thing, Ian, that's really important is now I'm not just me. I'm 20 plus people. How we communicate, what our goals are. We have a 1 year, a 5 year, and a 10-year plan. We have a 25-year plan. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there in 25 years, but I know what I'm chasing, and I know when I'm getting off base from that. And those are little things that if you were to set in place early, it can really help.
And I think, when we talk about speed and how quickly you would have moved, I think on the other side of it, one thing that I took away from watching you in those first few years is, and it stressed me out. Every time I talked to you, it stressed me out because I was still mired in grind, make a ton of money, grow this business in the middle of it. And you would call me also from Southern California, where you were working for 3 weeks. You would call me from a ski lodge in Colorado where you were out working for 2 weeks. Like you used to rub it in all the time that you've got all this freedom and ultimate freedom. And, I think maybe your speed was just right. I think maybe you needed to get bored. You needed some of those experiences to get away. I know personally, if we were to have this same podcast where you'd say, Ian, you know what, you've been gone from NBR for 2.5 years, how could you have gone a lot faster? It would be a terrible episode because I'd say, I don't want to go faster. Maybe in 10 years, I'll look back and say there's some things I could do. I'm kind of being deliberate because the one thing I took away from when you left, and I have kids, so it's even more important to me, is you did it right. You didn't work 12 hours a day. There wasn't 12 hours of work to do for you. You didn't have enough going on. You took time for you. You took 2-3 months a year where you were traveling and seeing things and doing things. And you'll never get that year 34, 35, 36, 37 back where you had a ton of fun.
So I was having a conversation with one of Ian and mine's good buddies, been my best friend since the 6th grade. And we were talking about like parenting kids through like how to not use drugs. And what's so funny is I told him, man, I thought you had that figured out. Like you were so smart on how you always negotiated around that as kids. And he goes, I didn't think that. He goes, I actually thought you had it right. And both of us went into the conversation thinking that the other one had the right plan. And that's part of this process. Like, it isn't right. It doesn't, it might look to someone else great, but it's a process you've got to just grind through. And then what you hope is that the next 10 years are slightly better than the previous, but you got to enjoy different parts of the process. Like when I would go to California or I would go to different places, I'd have my laptop. I'd work out half a day. I'd make calls. I couldn't project manage, but I could do other stuff from those locations. And those things usually happen 3, 4, 5 years after I started the business, when I started to have a staff I could rely on. But so there's not a right answer. If you want to do this, do it. I would think the thing that's really important, and I think you'll support this, Ian, but I'll ask, to me, pick a destination, constantly calibrate it, and make sure it's still going in the direction you want to go. And if it isn't, change it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's iteration comes at different paces. So for me, when I think of iteration, I think of the different businesses that I have. Are they all moving forward? They don't need to all be in the passing lane. I don't need to be in fifth gear in all of them with iteration. That's not where I'm at. But every business I'm involved in right now is moving forward. Now, some of them could move at a faster pace. There's 100%, and there are things I could do to do that. But I think, right now we're going through our ad campaign, Facebook ad campaigns, for my leadership programs. We just revamped my website, and I had a webinar that was 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we have software that can show when people drop off it. And I went and I cut 25 minutes out of it. And the new webinar, which has been running for a week, doubled in engagement. So it was down to 25% people 20 minutes in. Now it's up 55% all the way through until the offer. So now I got to figure out, okay, I want more to close. So my webinar is better. I've got my cost per lead down. People are staying on until my offer. But when they get to the offer, 35% are clicking on the page where they could purchase, but we don't have the hit rate that we want. So, okay, now I got to go figure out, is my close right? Or is it unrealistic to think someone's going to spend $2,000 on a cold webinar? What's my funnel that hits them after that? Do we set up a call where I talk to them? So that's iteration. But that, I've been working on this video program for over a year now. So it's been slow. Could I have cut that in half? For sure. That money and more of my personal time working around the clock, could have done all that. But what am I giving up? What am I giving up? Could I still coach 2 baseball teams? Probably not, right? I'd probably have to give one of them up or not be around as much. So I think iteration is all really a personal choice. How quick do you want to go? Maybe this whole podcast episode is just ridiculous. Maybe you moved at the exact pace you should have. Maybe the answer is, I wouldn't change shit. I wouldn't change a damn thing, because all of those mistakes I made cost money and they make me better today. And I needed to go learn all that stuff so I know what not to do today. And that it'd be fun for you and I to do a podcast in 10 years. We should set up a little reminder where you ask me this same series of questions, because I'm kind of starting off right now. And I would say I wouldn't change anything, Frankie. I had to learn all that stuff the hard way, and it was expensive, and damn it,
It's funny, right? Because there's a part of me that knows this is exactly what I needed to do. But if you are a type A personality, which you and I both are, there's also a side of you, you're like, I could have done this different. I could have done that different. And if you're not asking those questions of yourself, you certainly didn't work for the 2 publicly traded companies that Ian and I work for, because they would ask those questions of you all the time. And that's what's going to cause iteration. That's what's going to cause things. One of the things I told you in prep is the best thing about starting your own business is you don't have your own boss. You don't have a boss. One of the worst things about starting your own business is you don't have a boss. You no longer have anybody to tell you, do this, don't do that. You talked about it with mentors, but it's the same thing. The other thing is, this is your life. This is my life. This is your life. When you and I get together, we're really happy guys. We have a fucking great time. We drink good wine. We laugh. We enjoy what we're doing. And we know it isn't the right path for everybody else. That to me is freedom. That to me is what it's all about. What I would offer up and say is there's no one in your life that is going to audit your time. You need to be the person who audits your time and holds yourself accountable to where you spend it and where you don't. If I have a 1.5-year-old, he's almost 2. Since Corona hit, I have gotten him out of bed every morning, and I put him to bed every night, with the exception of maybe 5 days in a 6-month period. That is the best time in my day. I get him out of the crib. I'm missing email. I'm missing call. I don't give one shit. I started this business so when I could be a dad, I could choose how to do those things. The other thing that's really important to me too is I want my employees to feel like that. I've had people who've called me up and asked questions like, hey, my son's not feeling good. I don't know if I should come to the office. I get to manage an entire team of people with a heart. I get to say, I hired you for a reason. Be safe, be with your children, do these things, work those hours. That's incredible stuff. And that is stuff that needs to be celebrated and needs to be talked about. Like, are we curing cancer? Hell no. Are we owning properties? Do we do a good job? Do I love it? When you come to town, do I put you in the passenger seat and drive you around and show you things so I'm proud of it? Hell yeah. Financially, does it give me a great life? Yes. Do I get to be present with my wife and with my son? Yeah. Could I have done some things different? Shit, yeah. Is this a pretty good story? I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? So ultimately, what all this boils down to is, are you happy with the life you're leading, with the business you're building? The most important people in your life, are they happy with what you can commit when you are in front of them? We didn't talk about this, but I'm going to bring it up anyways. 18 months ago, 24 months ago, I have a kid. And my business was not, I had a component of my business that wasn't running properly. And when I was giving my kid a bath, I was not thinking about the bath or my kid. I was thinking about this segment of business that was screwed up and how this person was robbing me of the time that I needed to be in that moment and to be present. And what I learned is, if you are screwing up enough where you're taking away from those special moments in my life, you need to go. And you know this story. I got rid of that person. There was some pain. There was some personal relationship. But what happened was, now I get to control it. That's something I would not have done 10 years ago. I would have written a check to this dipshit and not said, I'm going to confront you and say, give me my damn money back. You're a fraud. I pussyfooted around it. But those are the things that, as you get a little bit older, you get a little bit of experience, you get some wind at your back. You're like, I refuse. You and I have talked. You refuse to miss baseball practice. You refuse. It's not a negotiable.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's you're talking about priorities, and that's you as a manager. When you run your own business, you can make decisions like that. You don't need to let a stress creep into your life that, for a person. And I would say that same advice applies to someone who's working for a company. If you are spending time with your family and you are distracted because in your mind is a bad boss, a miserable person to work for, you're in control. That I was there at the end at both of my companies, where when I'd be around friends or family, they'd be like, where are you? My kids were joking at the end there, you got to ask dad a question 5-6 times if you want him to answer it. And that hurts when you hear that. You're like, really? Every time? They're like, every time we have to just keep asking you because you don't listen to us. And the reason is, I had a bunch of garbage running around in my head that I was unhappy about. And that wasn't my manager's fault. That wasn't the company's fault. It was my fault. I was still there. So the answer is, go find something that doesn't rob you of great moments with people that you care about.
And as you're listening to this, both Ian and I have screwed this up. Like, we're being honest. Like, we have both screwed this up for years. Like, and we both seen it in the other person, but you've got to be the one who makes that change. And I said, you need to self-audit. It's the truth. You need people who can help you, but ultimately that decision is yours. Are you going to stay with that business? Are you going to change where you are? Are you going to open the business? Like, those are decisions you've got to make. They're very personal decisions. And you need to make the course corrections as you go along, because that's what it's all about.
It's been, I can tell you, Frankie, it's been awesome. And I'm really proud of you, but it's been so fun watching over the last decade, because it's fun for me to say I was there when you were insecure, when you didn't have self-confidence, when we would have conversations and you would just throw your hands up and say, do I just need to get a suit and go frickin' interview? Like, you would be just so pissed off or down on yourself. And we would talk through it and be like, really, is that what you want, Frank? And you, no, but and then we'd talk. It's been fun to watch you go through and find different mentors and grow as a leader and take something that was one condo in Charlottesville. It wasn't a business, and it was like that for 2 years, and grow it into something that's thriving and helping a lot of people. So it's been a blast for me to be, a friend of yours and have so many conversations and watch you do something so exceptional, over the last 10 years that it's been fun to go back here and kind of reminisce on some of these points.
So we're getting to a point where we're about to wrap, and I appreciate all that. We're both former athletes. We talk about the roles that we've had, tough bosses. We talk about our parents. We talk about all these different things. One of the things that, if you said, Frankie, summarize this for me, like summarize the 11, 12 years you've been in business and give it to me in a paragraph, I would say this. Nearly every single, and this is loosely stolen from someone else, but it really works. Loosely defined, nearly everyone will overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and grossly underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. The other quote I love on top of that is, if you'll do for a decade what others won't, you'll live the rest of your life the way others can't. And you and I have done that. You were texting me at 3 o'clock in the morning when you were getting up to read books and do things when your kids were little, so you could get to the office at 6 and be home at 5 and have time with them before they went to bed. I have lots of friends. I know almost no one who woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning for 5 years in a row. It's fucking insane. You did it. Little things I did. I didn't pay myself for like 6 years. I lived modestly, and I had enough money set aside where I could, but I literally didn't pay myself. I reinvested that money into the business because I knew eventually I could hire a couple people. I could spend a little bit more money on marketing. I'm sitting on 300 houses. Like, there's people with more, but there's a lot of people with less. And it was little decisions that just kind of manifest over and over and over. And it's like anything else you do. Little steps for a long period of time, it can really build something.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, I think we're wrapping this one up, big boy. I'm going to let you go back to taking that to 270 employees and 100 million in revenue.
A decade from now, let's see.
Decade from now, Holmes. That's pretty cool.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.